Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. When I first started editing photos 10 years ago, I used to have the hardest time understanding where to start and whether or not the order in which I apply adjustments matters to the end result. So if that sounds like something you struggled with, be sure to stick around as I'm going to share with you the flow that really made it all click for me when I was a beginner. And I do have the winner selected for the 300K giveaway, so be sure to stick around for that as well. So this is an image from the Dolomites from a couple of months ago. But one of the biggest things that I used to struggle with is, and like I said just a few moments ago, is really understanding where to start and edit. You know, should it be down in the color section? Should it be in the exposure? Should it be sharpening? Whatever the case may be. I never really understood where to start. And I always used to start in different places until I started to kind of establish a flow. And this really helped me out. So this is kind of a typical scenario where an image is slightly underexposed. The shadows are definitely very dark. So what I like to do now, and this is what kind of made everything click for me, is the very first thing that I want to do is to balance the overall exposure. Now, exposure is not just the exposure slider. Exposure is the exposure slider, it is shadows, it is highlights, it is the white point and the black point. So those 5 components, that makes up exposure. So it's not just one thing. So what I want to do is just go ahead and start to balance this. So I know I want to increase the exposure a little bit. So maybe about right there. I'm going to bring down the highlights a little bit because I want to be able to see some of that nice detail in the sky. As you can see, when I rock this back and forth, you can see that detail starts to come out. And a great little tip here is if you hold down the Shift key, you can double click these words. So if I hold down Shift and double click shadow, Lightroom will go ahead and make an adjustment. I can hold down Shift and hit the white point. I can hold down Shift and hit blacks as well. And you can see that Lightroom went ahead and made adjustments. Now, this does not mean that these are the correct adjustments. But what's great about this is it's a good starting point. It's a good kind of leading indicator, if you will, to help you to identify where an appropriate level might be for a specific slider. Basically, Lightroom is just using the histogram to try and tell you, say, hey, the white point should be moved here, or hey, the shadow should be lifted to this point. Like I said, it doesn't mean it's exactly right, but it's a good jumping off point. It's a good leading indicator to show you where maybe the shadows could potentially go. So if I reset shadows to 0, hold down the Shift key, double click shadows, Lightroom takes it to 76. Now I might want to back that off a little bit. I might want to increase it a little bit more, but it's just a good starting point to tell you where you should potentially move something. I can come up here to contrast and hold down the Shift key and double click that, and it'll say +7. You know, I might want to add a little bit more than that. But as of this point right now, the overall exposure of the scene is balanced. If I hit the backslash key to show you where we started, this is before and after, before and after. So now that the overall palette, if you will, the overall image, I can see all of it a lot better than I did before when it was just the raw file. You can see the shadows. The overall exposure isn't so dark. So it's kind of like I always refer to it as a palette, if you will, because I want to be able to see everything in order to make the other adjustments. So once the overall exposure is balanced, then I want to go ahead and start updating the color. Now, I've made a ton of videos on so many different ways to enhance color inside of Lightroom or any photo editing software. And you can really go down a rabbit hole when it comes to color. But for beginners, or if you're really just trying to figure out a way to simplify your overall workflow, this is a really good way to do it. So if I come down here to the calibration section, and if I just start to boost these saturation levels up. So I'm gonna take the blue primary, bring it up a fair amount, gonna bring up the saturation of the green primary a little bit, bring up the saturation of the red primary a little bit as well. If I toggle this on and off, you can see what that has done right there. Then from there, you can come up here back to the basics section and then take the vibrant slider and you can refine this to taste. So I can bring it down a little bit, I can bring it up a little bit more. I really never touch the saturation slider. And if you're not familiar with what the difference between saturation and vibrance is, saturation basically impacts every single color in your image the same exact way. Vibrance basically impacts the more saturated colors more. So it's a little bit more refined. I like to think of the vibrance slider as a smart saturation tool. Here's a good example here. If I reset this, if I take saturation to -100, it's a completely black and white photo because it desaturated every single color in this image the same exact way. If I do the same thing with vibrance and take this to -100, you can see that, yeah, it looks black and white, but you can still see a lot of blue areas right through here, a little bit of orange. It's very, very subtle, but you can see that there is a difference there. So what I like to do is I'll just enhance the colors in the calibration section just a little bit. And then you can come over here to the vibrance channel and just kind of bring it down, bring it back a little bit. You can increase it a little bit, just kind of moving it to taste. And then from there, any specific colors that seem a little bit overdone, then you can go ahead and individually enhance those or desaturate them. It's really up to you. But for my liking, I think the blues might be just a little bit overdone. So from here, I'll come down to the color mixer section, have this on saturation, and just bring down those blues a little bit. Nothing to like that, but swinging these kind of sliders back and forth is a great way to see what they are doing. So I'm going to bring this to maybe about right there, and I think that that's starting to look pretty good. And that's something that I failed to mention in the beginning. The power of swinging these sliders back and forth, it cannot be understated. So understated, overstated? I might have got that backwards, but I'll show you what I mean right here. So when it comes to, say, the highlight slider, just taking this to -100, +100, and just swinging it back and forth is a great way just to see what it is doing to the overall photograph. So I'm gonna bring it back to where it was. Same thing with the shadows, going all the way back and forth. I do this with just about every single slider before I make the overall adjustment, is to just take a couple quick swings all the way to the left, all the way to the right, because I really want to be able to easily see what area is being impacted and what that impact looks like in comparison to the overall photograph. And now, since we're still enhancing color, what I'm going to do is update the white balance. This definitely looks a little bit cool. What you can always do is you can just come down here to auto to see what that has done. That to me looks much better than it did before. I might warm it up just a little bit right there. But those two steps right there, balancing the overall exposure and then moving down to color, that's a really, really simple workflow for anyone who's just kind of getting started with editing photos. And then from there, I go ahead and add effects or any kind of, like vignettes or things like that. So, or clarity and texture. So I'm going to bring the clarity down a little bit, just because I like to soften my photos up a touch. Maybe bring the texture up a little bit as well. I'm gonna come down here to the effects section and let's add a vignette to this photograph. Maybe about something right there I think looks pretty good. And I also want to crop the photo. So whenever I start to do these kind of effects, it's usually where I'll start to play with different crops as well. I'm gonna come up here. I'm gonna leave it locked at the original aspect ratio. I just wanna bring this up just a touch to maybe about right here, bring it down just a little bit. I kind of want that rule of thirds line, or kind of want that line right there to be on the horizon line of the lake, if you will. I think something about right here looks good. I think that looks a little bit more focused right there. And then once the overall photograph is balanced, the color is enhanced, I've added any kind of effects and put a crop on there. The very last thing I like to do is just go ahead and add any kind of masks. And I'm not gonna get super crazy with the different types of masks because much like color, the masking capabilities inside of Lightroom is extremely robust, and you can once again go down a deep rabbit hole on that as well. And the purpose of this video is kind of a beginner editing flow for those kind of getting started or those just trying to establish any type of routine or cadence that they can go through every single time on all photographs. So I'm going to keep these masks pretty simple. So one of my favorite parts of this image are the leaves floating right here, and it looks a little bit dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the masking section. I'm going to hit linear gradient, and I'm just going to draw a gradient right like this. And I know it's not level. I don't want it to be level. I want it to kind of mimic the flow of these leaves. Those leaves are kind of end on an angle as well. So from there, I'm just going to bring up the exposure a little bit. I'm going to bring up these shadows just a touch as well. I'm going to bring that black point down just a little bit, maybe add a little bit of contrast to this area. I really want to make the color of these leaves really stand out. So I'm going to bring the saturation of this mask up a little bit, maybe even warm it up a touch. You can see what that's really doing. That looks nice there, I think. And let's toggle that on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. So you can really see how these leaves really stand out now. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to enhance this area here, and this is the last mask I'm going to apply because all of that area is very, very dark. It's in a deep, deep shadows, and I want to enhance that. I don't want that area to be so dark. I want to be able to see a little bit of that detail. So I'm going to come up here, let's hit plus, let's do a radial gradient, and we'll drag it right across this area here. Let's bring it down to about like that. Maybe something about like this looks pretty good. And let's bring up the exposure there. Let's bring up the shadows a fair amount. Maybe bring down that black point just a touch and add a little bit of contrast. Maybe we could warm that up a little bit as well right there. Let's toggle that on and off and see what this looks like. So this is before and after, before and after. And we can toggle the entire edit on and off now. Let's close this down. So this is before and after, before and after. And it's a 4-step process, and it starts with balancing the exposure of the overall photograph. And the very important part is balancing the exposure is not just the exposure slider. It's the exposure slider, it's the shadows, the highlights, and the white point and the black point. 5 sliders will help you balance the exposure. Once your image is balanced and you can see the overall palette that you're working with, now you can go in and start to refine the colors. If you imagine the way this raw file looked, or a lot of raw files look, they're either extremely bright or maybe they're very dark. It would be super difficult to try and enhance color until you balance that exposure. So balancing the exposure is very, very important. So balance that, enhance the colors, then you can go ahead and add your effects and add your a crop, if you will. And then the very last thing is you want to go ahead and add masks. That's a very simple 4-step workflow that you can go through. Once again, this is the raw file. Can you imagine if we tried to enhance the color with the raw file looking like this before we balance the exposure? It'd be very, very difficult. And this is where we're at right now. And you can go through this workflow on any photograph. And it just gives you a very easy way. It really clicked for me, and it just kind of created a structure to my workflow. I'm not sure about you, but when I first started editing photos, I was all over the place. There are so many different tools inside of Lightroom. It's easy to become overwhelmed, or any photo editing platform, to be confused about where you should start. And I was just bouncing around. I edited every single photo in a different way until I started to kind of go through this flow, and it really, really helped me out. And I hope it'll help you out as well. Now, as far as the 300K giveaway is concerned, 2 weeks ago, I posted a video all about that. The channel crossed over 300,000 subscribers a couple weeks ago, which is absolutely incredible. Thank you all so much for the support. There was, I believe, almost 1,500 entries to win the Shimoda camera bag, and I do have a winner selected. And the winner, and this is completely random, I went through as many of the comments as I possibly could, but a completely random selection. So the winner of the 300K giveaway is a gentleman by the name of John Duransky. John, congratulations, you are the winner. Thank you so much, John, for entering the giveaway. And thank you so much for everyone who entered the giveaway as well. And most importantly, thank you all for watching the videos and commenting and liking and subscribing to the channel over the years. It really means the world to me. So John, if you could reach out to me, Instagram, send me an email through my website, whatever the case may be, let me know where I should send this bag to, and I will make sure I get it out to you this week. And last but not least, almost forgot, I do want to say a big thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a robust and beautiful online platform to develop your website. You can showcase your photography using Squarespace's new blueprint design system to help guide you through the options to building your online presence from the ground up. You can even display your photography using Squarespace's flexible website design templates and customize the layout in order to make it your own. And with Squarespace's online store feature, you'll have access to all the tools you need to start selling your physical goods, digital content, or service products online with ease. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So thank you all so much for all of the support over the years. And if you have any questions regarding anything we covered in this week's video, please leave those in the comment section below, and I will do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as humanly possible. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.